Okay, let's get into this. We've all been seeing the just the tragic human cost of conflicts lately, like the war between Israel and Palestine. It's truly devastating to watch.
It really is. But sort of buried within that awful news, the material we looked at shows something else happening, a really surprising, almost stark contrast.
That's just what exactly.
Well, while people are suffering, losing lives, communities are being shattered, certain, let's say, entities are actually benefiting a lot.
Benefiting.
Financially, significantly. So our mission in this deep dive really is to cut through the noise and see what the sources tell us about this global weapons industry.
Right, and the first thing that just jumps out is pretty staggering. Since that war began, the stock prices of the big American weapons companies,
Yeah.
they shot up like $30 billion combined.
30 billion. Wow. And it's not just like a general market thing either. The sources point out companies like Raytheon, General Dynamics, they actually told their investors that the conflict in Israel would be, well, good for business.
They actually said that.
Indicated it, yeah.
Yeah.
Financially advantageous. And others, Lockheed Martin, they make the F-35s. Israel uses Northrop Grumman too. They saw big jumps in their stock value as well.
So a direct financial link to the conflict, almost immediate.
Exactly. It's right there in the numbers.
Okay, so my first thought might be, well, countries buy weapons from their friends, their allies, right? Like the U.S. gives Israel a lot of military aid.
About $3.8 billion a year. And yeah, something like 92% of Israel's imported weapons do come from the U.S.
So that seems straightforward.
Yeah.
U.S. helps ally.
On the surface, yeah. But if you dig into the global picture the sources paint, it gets, well, peculiar. The whole weapons industry, it seems like it operates beyond just politics or alliances.
That's so?
Its main goal looks like profit, maximizing profit. It doesn't seem to matter as much who is buying. I mean, the U.S. set a record, didn't it? $205 billion in weapons sales worldwide recently.
Yeah, 49% increase. That's huge to 58 different countries.
Right, and who those 58 countries are. That's where it gets interesting. It's not just allies like Israel. It includes several Arab nations right there in the same region.
Like Saudi Arabia, Qatar.
Exactly. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE. So you've got the same main supplier selling really advanced weapons to countries that could potentially be adversaries.
Oh, so the U.S. is doing that.
And it's not just the U.S. Israel itself had record weapon sales last year, over $12 billion. And guess what? About a quarter of those sales also went to Arab countries.
Okay, that is complicated. Does selling weapons to multiple sides actually make things safer? Feels counterintuitive.
That's the critical question, isn't it? And it highlights this other thing. The world's top arms exporters, U.S., Russia, France, China, the U.K., they're also the permanent members of the UN Security Council.
The body meant to keep the peace.
Right. And together they account for, over 75% of all global arms exports?
Oh.
So it creates this really complex dynamic,
And here's something else from the sources that really shifted my perspective. You might assume these are government-to-government deals, mostly.
Yeah, that seems logical.
But the vast majority of weapons sold globally, even by these top countries, they aren't actually sold by the governments themselves.
No, that's right. They're sold by private companies. You look at the list of the top 100 weapons companies in the world, very few are state-owned.
Lockheed Martin is number one, right?
Yeah.
A private American company.
Precisely. And 51 of the top 100 are American companies. So these huge profits, often paid for with taxpayer money from the countries buying the weapons.
It flows mainly into private hands.
Exactly.
Okay, but then there's this other layer, the potential conflict of interest. The sources talked about politicians.
The ones shaping defense policy, voting on budgets, approving arms sales.
Yeah. Many of them apparently have personal investments, stocks, in these same military contractor companies.
So if the company does well because of conflict or big sales, the politician benefits financially, personally. The sources mentioned figures like Dick Cheney and Halliburton back in the day, massive contracts there.
And it's not just speculation.
No. One source noted that as of 2021, at least 15 influential U.S. politicians involved in defense policy had direct investments in military firms. And beyond just money, there's the idea that conflict can sometimes be politically useful,
Like distracting from problems at home, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that dynamic. It's something people like George Orwell wrote about ages ago in 1984, the idea of perpetual tension serving a purpose.
And this whole industry, its impact isn't just over there in conflict zones.
Yeah.
The sources connect it back home, too, particularly thinking about gun violence in America.
Right, which is still alarmingly high, the connection being the powerful lobbying by the industry that helps keep gun regulations quite lax.
So you have politicians offering thoughts and prayers after tragedies, but the actual gun trade just keeps booming. Sales tripled between 2005 and 2020 in the U.S. alone.
It really shows how the industry's influence can hit ordinary people's safety right here at home.
And the industry keeps evolving, doesn't it? It's not just about selling fighter jets anymore. The sources talked about private military companies. Mercenaries, basically.
Yeah, like Russia's Wagner Group or the American company Blackwater, now called Constellus, I think. Governments hire them.
Why? Is it cheaper?
Sometimes that's the claim. Or maybe it helps avoid public scrutiny that comes with using national troops, potentially hiding casualties. These groups pop up in conflicts everywhere, often guarding private interests like mines, and they've faced serious human rights abuse accusations.
And it even goes digital. Cyber mercenaries.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Private groups selling hacking, disinformation, surveillance services for profit, sometimes interfering in elections, the sources suggested.
So putting it all together, it's this massive global industry. Huge amounts of money, often taxpayer money, flowing mostly to private companies. It seems to cross political lines, ignores traditional alliances maybe.
Yeah, and it's constantly adapting its methods.
Okay, so let's quickly recap. What have we really uncovered here from the sources?
Well, first, conflicts directly fuel huge profits for these mostly private weapons companies. Second, these sales often ignore traditional political divides, going to potential adversaries.
Third, this major conflict of interest issue with politicians investing in the very companies benefiting from defense spending in conflict, plus the potential political upsides of conflict itself.
Right. And fourth, the lines of warfare are getting blurry with the rise of these private military groups and even cyber mercenaries.
And ultimately, it seems like ordinary people, whether they're caught in conflicts far away or dealing with things like gun violence at home, they're the ones paying the price.
While others are profiting immensely from the very tools driving that conflict.
So it leaves you with this really unsettling thought to chew on, doesn't it? If the survival, the profitability of this massive global industry fundamentally depends on conflict, on war in all its forms, does that reliance help explain why conflict just seems to persist? Why it seems so hard to actually stop? Is it just too beneficial for some?